Hey guys, so I have a proposal because I don't want to be between you and the amazing friendships that I see being created here in the last. So I'll do a short version, and then those of you that are interested, please come talk to me during the lunch or afterwards. You can come find me and talk. But the idea was that since I'm involved in the startup world, some of you may know, some of you may not. I would talk to you a little bit about my experiences with startups, and particularly with medical device startups. So has anyone heard of a company named MySugar, a digital app company? So I was one of the co-founders of this company in Austria, and it started in 2012, and it was a really amazing experience for me. I had already previously been in startups. In California, I'd worked on, in fact, a startup that Abbott acquired. We were working on continuous blood glucose monitoring technology. So I'm trained as an engineer, and I was working on the interactions of CGM sensors with the blood in the first generation CGMs. And Abbott Labs actually acquired our company, TheraSense. I was a very junior engineer, so one of many hundreds of people, and we were acquired. That was kind of my first acquisition in the startup world, and I kind of got the bug and have been working as a serial entrepreneur more or less ever since. MySugar was an amazing story. So this was a group of Germans, Austrians, and a Swede was the odd man. Me and the Swede were the odd man out in the initial team, and we really wanted to create a diabetes application that felt personal. So in 2012, it was novel to create a diabetes app. I think now if you search in diabetes app in the App Store, you probably get 200, 300, 400 different responses, which is great, by the way. But at the time, there wasn't one that we felt was there made by people with diabetes for people with diabetes. So those of you who don't know the app, the idea is this Tamagotchi-style monster. And the idea is that when you enter information into the app, whether it's blood sugar or food or whatever, into this journal, which is automatically fed by various devices, your blood glucose meter or otherwise, you get points. And as you gain points for the diabetes monster, as we called it, then your monster was tamed throughout the day. And then he makes funny expressions and reacts when you do things, and then even makes some snarky comments. So the idea was to bring some light to this shitty thing that's diabetes that you're so tediously trying to take care of. And so we got a huge response from it, from people who really liked what we were doing, and the company grew bit by bit, and we partnered with industry, and eventually the company was acquired by Roche, so the product still exists today, distributed by Roche all over the world. So it's a really exciting thing as an entrepreneur to see your product that was your baby. Sometimes it's a hard thing too, but being distributed by a big company to parts of the world where you would have had otherwise no access in terms of distribution channels and this kind of thing. So I won't bore you with the details of that, but I think for me, there's really exciting things happening in technology. The ones that I really noticed throughout the course of this week and in the past months, a lot of them are around CGM. We hear a lot of buzz around CGM. In fact, there was an announcement yesterday evening, our time, and in the US it was during the day, that Dexcom is launching their new G7 product, or I should say the FDA has approved the G7 product, so we would expect it to be launched soon. That's not news to us in Europe, right, because that's already been launched in some markets, but it's a big deal on that side of the Atlantic. And we've seen, I think, something that's really exciting with CGM technology is that the cost has come down. Thanks to companies like Abbott, it's become much more affordable. And the innovation is not only in the technology itself, but the price point, because as the price point gets lower, it can be accessible by more and more people. And I was in a session yesterday that Niti Paul was chairing, talking about working with industry. Kind of similar to the session we did about working with industry, but it was more about how to win reimbursement for different types of diabetes products on behalf of people with diabetes. And I think that the example of Abbott in this case, working with the Fédération Française des Diabétiques, is a really neat one. they decided to partner up, and the FFD wanted to, and maybe Léonore might have some insight. I don't know if you're still in the room, Léonore, on this, because I want to get to the point you brought up to me earlier in the week. It's rare that you see industry with their entire campaign take a fully sensitive campaign because they have other interests, right? We all know that. These companies are making money. But in this case, there was no CGM product that was available in France until they did this campaign, and they basically went full court press right before an election to try to put pressure on the policymakers so that there would be a decision about reimbursement. And it was the first in this category. And after about a 5 or 6 year battle by the association and by people living with diabetes in France, finally, almost overnight, once this decision was made, CGM, Flash CGM, showed up in pharmacies for people with diabetes. And then all of a sudden, the entire nation knew about it. And I remember walking into a pharmacy the next day, and the pharmacists can be a bit salespeople in France, depending on where you are. And they were already, they fully knew all the details. Oh, let me tell you about this. And it was pretty exciting for me, someone who had worked on that technology as an engineer, knowing how much it helped my own diabetes and seeing how much it helped others to make it accessible. So I think we're making progress in that sense. And I wanted to bridge this conversation a little bit to something. If you don't mind, Léonore, I'm putting you a little bit on the spot, but she brought up a really interesting point after one of the industry sessions, and that was the Dexcom session on advocacy. I think it's important that we are fully transparent at IDF about how we work with our corporate partners. I think it's important for you to know that. So in the case of this program at YLD, we had 3 major corporate partners. You heard from 2 of the 3 of those, and it's true. They had more time in front of you, and I think it's very important for you to be aware of that. And maybe, Léonore, would you mind saying a few words about your thoughts? Because I think it would be interesting for the group.
Yeah, the comment that I made to Kyle was right after having this conversation with Dexcom for 1 full hour. I went to him and asked how much do they pay to be able to talk to all of us at the same time, and for 1 full hour, which is a lot. And I just wanted to make sure that all of us know that they are paying and sponsoring the program. It does not mean that as advocates we cannot work with companies. We need them to provide us with great CGMs, Omnipod, everything. But we need to be aware that they always have business interests when they talk to us. So whenever we were asking, when is Dexcom coming to my country? When is Dexcom coming? Are you going to launch Dexcom One and stuff? It's always a business thing for them. And I went to him and asked, why are you launching Dexcom One in those countries and, for instance, not in France? Well, because France will pay the high price for it. So why would we want to give up the same product for less money? And so we have to just keep in mind that even if they're working for us, with us, they have some business interests, and not just Dexcom, any company. Whenever they're gonna reach out to you and you have a big voice, a big platform on social media, so a lot of companies will reach out to you. Just try to think if it's a real interest for the community. Always disclose when it's a partnership with a company. Always stay transparent, like IDF is doing. We need this money to be able to organize all those conferences, and this program wouldn't exist, I guess, if they didn't pay for it. But we also need to just keep that in mind.
Any other comments about this topic? It's a really important topic.
So I guess I would agree with what she said, because we in Bosnia have been trying to get Abbott to tell us, why aren't you coming to our market? And I guess that's what we all expect, transparency, because they never publicly, officially stated a reason why they're not coming. And that is one of the biggest barriers why we can't help them, because I can't help you with an issue that I don't know exists. So I guess if they would ask patients or patient organizations, we have this and this issue, could you maybe internally in your country see how we can organize that? It will be much easier for us. So I guess that transparency needs to come from both sides, and I guess with time, manufacturers are going to be more open to receiving that help because the market is spreading, and being transparent from both sides should be also important, if you understand what I'm saying.
I mean, I think in France we, again, Leonel, I'll jump in if I'm speaking out of turn, you think, but in France we have a tendency to really almost criminalize anyone who is making money in the health sector, meaning that health is a right, healthcare is a right, and most of the French people, I think, believe this, and that you shouldn't have to pay for it, and the social system is set up as such, which is wonderful. I, having worked in industry, was even some of my cousins and French family were, couldn't believe I was contributing to an industry that was making money on healthcare products. Maybe it's my American-French mix, I don't know, but I don't see it as black and white. I think it's complicated. I think we need companies to innovate, and that costs money, but we also need to find the right balance, and it's true. I'm really glad Léonore approached me after the session because we at IDF, we represent a neutral party in this. We happen to have these three sponsors, but what we're interested more in this particular session was about talking about advocacy. It wasn't necessarily the Dexcom version of advocacy. That being said, if you have projects where you think you could work with them, maybe it's helpful to understand their perspective. So we'll really look for you and your feedback over the coming days about which sessions were most helpful so we can really adapt and evolve this training from year to year. I've already had several conversations with you. I appreciate the feedback, and I look forward to a lot more. How are we doing on lunch, Bruno? We got about 5 minutes, 10 minutes?
We are really dependent and waiting for the people to deliver.
Oh, okay. Okay. So should I continue? Okay. We have don't we have slides that we wanted to present on the budget? Was this in the program? Because it's related to what I'm talking about. Maybe the slides are not there. Any questions about what I've just mentioned? Yeah, Ricardo.
No, I just wanted to share the perspective on the corporate session. So I think that's definitely a gray area and that we need to work on. So it's not black and white like Kyle mentioned, but if we want innovation and if we want technology, we need to bridge these gaps. So we need to have people that live with the condition, that can share direct experiences with the corporate that are doing their research and development to innovate. And I think it's a gray zone, but we can be the bridge between the two, and that's a very good thing, and I think that enriched the program itself.
Yeah, well said. Have any of you ever had, yeah, Leonel, go ahead.
So as Kyle mentioned, maybe it's very particular in France because we criminalize anyone who's doing something good and with companies and private sector. But maybe just always also try to think of how independent you want to be. For instance, if you create your own nonprofit, in my case in France, it's very important. And even though I would need that money for my nonprofit, I don't take any money from companies directly to found the nonprofit. They can found maybe one project, one event, but I'm clear that I'm never gonna give them like a stand to talk to all the members at the moment. They're just gonna do that because they want to, they believe it's a good project. But privately on my Instagram account, or maybe when I'm doing some other consulting stuff for companies, then I would take money from private sector. But always try to think how important it is to stay independent as a non-profit also.
Can I ask a question? So, no, it's very short. Just so I think it's important for us to know also where you receive funds from, if not for-profit institutions.
So it means that we have a really small budget. And so, for instance, every member of the association has to pay a fee, a membership every year of 10 euros. So we try to make it accessible for everyone, but at the same time, it gives us a small budget to run all the small events that we want to do. But that's why I was saying, if you want to do something bigger, then you need the help of companies, and then you might need to accept that those funds for specific events. But a lot of people, especially in France, I guess, but also I think in America, in the US, when Beyond Type 1 partnered with Dexcom or with Lilly, they got really smashed at. I mean, you need to make sure that the partnerships that you have is not going to damage your image as an independent association. So you get the membership that can give you some money, and you can also, there's a lot of European or national help for association in general. Your municipality at the level of your city, they give a lot of helps for association. And mainly I try to get things for free. So whenever I'm organizing like the inspiring meetups, I rent this place, but I explain that it's for an association. They give me a date where they don't have a company booking it. And I say, instead of just having it empty, would you lend it to us? And then I pay like very, very small fee for maybe the technician guy who's here, but not for renting the place. Or we do it in parks, in coffee shops, in other places. So the main thing I do is getting things for free.
Thank you. Very good to know your experience. Learn from it.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's really important, right? I think that actually a lot of us doing work in this field, if we could do work without funds from potential influencing or perceived influencing organizations, would choose to do so. But to Leonore's point, it's difficult to attain the budgets we need. And what I mean by that is, non-pharma, non-med device. In France, I've seen, for example, there are banks that have foundations. There are, what is it en anglais? The insurances. Some of them have foundations that will contribute. No, I don't think so. Am I acting funny?
It's slower than usual.
Check.
He is a USA walking manner, so
No, I'm okay. I'm just slow. I have diabetes, okay? I think it's a really good discussion, and I maybe to finish. Oh yeah, another point from Leila, please.
I think on the topic of funding, there is something that I guess a lot of people would maybe love to talk about, but are afraid of saying something. For example, where I come from, corruption from certain NGOs has been a big problem. And I guess it's really hard to stand up against that if you don't have the support from your community. And you see all of those people, getting funds and using them in the wrong way and maybe painting a wrong picture about how it actually looks like. And I guess it's always more difficult than we expect it to be, especially like when you get first into advocacy, you don't know how to do anything. And if you join the wrong group, if you get into the wrong partnerships, you're going to paint a bad picture about yourself. So maybe what I always gave as an advice to people coming first into advocacy is always be careful with who you partner with and do your background research, because you'll do something that you maybe think is positive for you, but it ends up being damaging for you. And I think it's a very important thing to know, when doing advocacy, that is not just about diabetes, that there are many political and economic impacts and things related to that, and it's always a bigger meaning behind certain things. So working in nonprofits can be also very dangerous, because if you sign a document with your name and you represent something and it then turns out to be something you didn't expect, then you're putting yourself in danger. So I guess I would say always be careful, and even if you have someone who's new in advocacy, give them that advice to be careful with who they engage with. It's not only companies, it's also NGOs that, there are also people who use the space in the wrong way. So
really like the advice, Leila, of kind of surveying your network about what do you think of these guys if I were to work with these guys, even people who may not be in diabetes, like your family member. How would you perceive if all of a sudden my association started working with them? Yeah, because even a perceived conflict of interest, perception is everything, right? Well, listen, I think we've got a few more minutes before we're going to eat, and I want to end on one and circle back to innovation. So there's a really cool example of innovation that I like to talk about, being an engineer geek myself. And has anyone heard of the loop that has been made? It's a hybrid closed loop pump, but it's not being offered by the commercial manufacturer. It's actually a DIY system. How many people have heard of this? Oh, wow, okay. And so the story behind this, for those of you who don't know, the story behind this is actually there is an association called Night Scout in Silicon Valley in California, where the parents of children with type 1 diabetes were frustrated about the pace of development with the big companies. They were waiting for Medtronic, they were waiting for others to bring together this closed loop between the pump and the CGM, and they decided to do it themselves, so they essentially hacked into the system and created their own software to create a hybrid closed loop pump, which is a pretty remarkable thing in itself. And the way they were able to do this is that they actually were people that were working in Silicon Valley, so they were working at some of the biggest software and hardware, Intel, you name it. Those companies, a lot of them are based in Silicon Valley, so they had that skill set, and they would start to do these kind of hackathons together to say, hey, how could we bring the code? And they managed to make it so they could have a little Raspberry Pi. Anyone seen a Raspberry Pi? It's the little white box, right? Does anyone have one with them? You know what it is, though, right? It's essentially a computer in a box that has it's a little motherboard chip that can communicate both in radio frequency and in Bluetooth, and it allows actually to create a hybrid closed loop. And so with this little white box, with your pump and CGM, they were matching different brands. They created a hybrid closed loop system and developed all sorts of features that didn't even exist on the current commercial pumps. Now, I'm not telling you to go off and make your own insulin and pumps, and I mean this is a huge operation. It was a crowdsourced operation, in this case of technical knowledge. But what it allowed to happen was that industry saw this, recognized it, and saw that patients were innovating. They were innovating with features that didn't exist on the current CGM. Remote monitoring of CGM, for example, to be able to have a follower on Dexcom, parents, caretakers. This didn't exist before Night Scout had done it. And they copycatted it. And what better compliment as an entrepreneur than to have some big business copy your idea and incorporate it into their product that they're distributing to millions of people. And I think that type of innovation, crowdsourced innovation from people with diabetes, is a beautiful example of how we can contribute to industry in a way that we may not have thought of. So I think I'm being cued to move on to the next topic. Is that right?